You found the rabbi and the pastor. My name is Kent Philpott. I'm the pastor, and this is...
And I'm Tsvi Bar-David, and I'm a rabbi.
And he's a rabbi, and where do you live? You in Berkeley?
I live in Berkeley, California.
Ooh, that scares me. We're going to talk about contemporary issues, politics, and you're from Berkeley.
So we have to make a bridge between us.
Yeah.
Because we have to model that to everybody.
That's right. There we go. And we got this sheet in front of us, so we practicing social distancing.
Right.
This is our last time in the studio. We're at the studio here at Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley because we can't get in the studio.
Right.
So this is the last time we've been going on for 2 years, Svi.
Wow.
And it's been a fabulous time.
It has. It
has. And so we're talking about contemporary issues here. We want to talk about the American election in November. Have you got a horse in the race?
Of course I do, and it's Joe and Kamala whose husband is Jewish and says, you know what, I'm Kamala the Mamala. I mean, that's almost enough for me to vote for her right there.
Okay, Svi, so there you go.
I do.
And I don't let people in our church know how I vote.
Probably wise.
It's probably wise. In this little church, we have people on the left, we got them on the right, and I try to prevent people from knowing how I'm going to vote. That way, I avoid factioning.
Right. And which can be so divisive to a community. I mean, listen, it's no different in the Jewish community. I belong to a number of different Jewish communities, like the Aquarian Minyan and Nativot Shalom in Berkeley, and you'd be amazed, not everybody is as liberal as I am, and there are folks who hold very different views on Israel. That's usually the divide. Like, are you in favor of the settlements or are you against the settlements? That seems to be the divide in religious Jewish communities. And typically, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of folks in the Jewish community are one-issue voters when it comes to Israel. So they will pick a horse in the race that they feel is going to do the best for Israel. And my response to that is, you got to be careful about who you think is going to do the best for Israel. There's a phrase that came out of the run-up to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 of the Common Era, where there were zealots who went around suppressing anybody who thought that it was a bad idea to revolt against the Romans. They thought it was a good idea to revolt against the Romans, which ultimately led to the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of any Jewish autonomy in Israel, which in any event was a protectorate or province of the Roman Empire by 70 of the Common Era. And the rabbis, in retrospect, said concerning the Zealots, Hem lo netore karta, hem machrive karta, which is half Hebrew and half Aramaic, two sister languages, and the phrase was a contemptuous phrase on the part of the rabbis vis-a-vis these zealots, these kanaim, meaning they think that they are the protectors of the city, but nay, they are its destroyers.
Now the zealots, there was one of the apostles, one of the 12 apostles, Philip, was a zealot.
Was he a zealot in the sense of he believed in military rebellion against Rome?
Yes.
He did.
Apparently so.
Uh-huh.
Now, when he became a follower of Jesus, apparently that disappeared. There was a time in toward the close, just the last few days of Jesus' life. It came out, long story, but amongst the apostles, there were two swords. Two guys had swords.
The rusty swords?
Huh?
Is it the story of the two rusty swords?
Well, I don't. I'm not sure.
That.
I know that story, Svi.
I believe there is a story like that. It's somewhere in the Gospels.
Okay. Well, we know that there was two swords. Jesus said, "How many swords we got? We got two." The zealot probably had one of them. I think this in the American circumstance right now, I don't think it's all that unusual. I think these sort of things periodically take place. in history.
Yes, cyclically.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's almost cyclical, isn't
Yes.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Marxists, a revolt against Tsarist Russia. You'd have to say that there was something similar to that, and also the communist thing under Mao early on. Looking for moderate voices, I would imagine. The moderate voices. I'm leery of the extreme on either side.
You know, it really depends on that thing we're going to discuss later on, which is how to acquire values, how to identify and acquire value. It really depends upon what our Buddhist brothers and sisters call the view and the values. They focus more on the view, but I want to focus not only on the view, the perspective, what some call the bubble we live in, the view, and what my values are, what your values are. And because I do believe that people act according to a value system. Sometimes they're conscious of it, and sometimes they are not.
One of the things that may be the reasons for the unconsciousness of it, it just occurs to me, is the development of the sense of disenfranchised, being disenfranchised by some people.
Right.
Also, the anxiety and the anger that boils up in times like this, and it has a tendency, in my understanding of things, is to move people to an extreme, to move people to the extremes. I think in both the left and the right, you'll find the moderate on the right, the moderate on the left, but you're going to find the radicals on the left and on the right.
You know, Kent, that's a way. That is certainly a view, and it's a sort of a traditional view in the Northern Hemisphere of how politics happens. It's a fight between those who are more socialistically inclined and those who are more capitalistic inclined, or something like that. But I think, while that's certainly a factor in the American political dynamic, I should hear myself. I sound like a political side, but I think there's another factor that has become, I've really become more and more aware of it in my kishkas, in my gut, in my bone marrow, and that is this country re-fights, relitigates the Civil War at least every generation, if not every half generation. And there's little question in my mind that, especially given the unleashed rhetoric of President Trump, where he's not doing dog whistles, he's quite straight up about, I'm here to protect your white suburbs against encroachment from people of color of various sorts, not to speak of those ravening socialists and communists, so to speak, that this on some level, and Trump has a great deal to do with sort of sharpening the point of the pencil, right? This is yet another generational relitigation of the Civil War. Is this country a democracy with freedom and the franchise, the right to vote for all, regardless of race, color, creed, national origin, sexual orientation, the list goes on? Or is this a country which needs to have, not to put a fine point on it, needs to be a white supremacy country, which demographically is going to go away in 10 to 20 years in any event, demographically. Another
way I have of evaluating our contemporary experience is the concept of the development of a cultic mentality. I don't want to cite my reasons for my understanding of this, except to say that I had been caught up in a cultic mentality during the 1970s.
You yourself personally?
Yes, me and myself. Went through a long recovery process. I taught 6 years on cult recovery support, how to get through it, how to identify it. It comes, the two major aspects of it are the religious and the political cults. There's the educational psychotherapeutic, there's the economic cult. But I see here, in my personal experience, and my temptation to go on an extreme, but to essentially to vilify, to demonize people who have a differing point of view, to the point that your voice needs to be silenced. We don't want to see you in the newspapers or in the media. Your views are awful. We've got to shut you down. And I find this on both the left and the right. Everybody's vulnerable to this, and I think we can easily go to the extremes.
And the psychological view of the very same thing, I think, is encompassed in the term polarization. If I'm not careful and you're not careful, we're going to polarize each other and make the situation worse, and we're going to destroy the bridge rather than build a bridge. You know, sort of as an aside, in religions that had priesthoods, like Judaism up until the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 of the Common Era, and by the way, I'm in that lineage biologically.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Kohen. I'm a priest, as well as a rabbi. For example, the Greco-Roman religion, right? The Roman religion in particular had a priesthood. The term for the chief of the priests of the Roman religion, as you probably know, is Pontifex, the bridge builder, the bridge maker. And I've always been struck by the beauty of that phrase. And it's not only the bridge between heaven and earth, which probably the Romans were referring to in Latin, Pontifex, right? Bridge builder, bridge maker. I want to use that phrase between you and me, a Jew, a strong Jew, a strong Christian, and other strong Jews and strong people of strong faith. You know, how do we create bridges over troubled water?
Sure.
Really.
One of the other subjects I want to get to
Please,
on this is, which is somewhat offensive to me.
Huh.
And that is the thinking on the part of the culture in general, I think, is that Trump's essentially base is the evangelical Christians. And I have not yet seen that countered. But I think that is a bit of a mistake, and it's a whitewashing or a narrative that is used to demean or to identify the other side, these people that we disagree with. And as an evangelical Christian myself, I'm thoroughly evangelical Christian. I find that large numbers of evangelical Christians are for Trump.
You do find that?
Yeah, I do find that. And it's because of many of the positions that have been embraced by, let's say, the supporters, the Biden-Harris supporters, which, for example, the LGBTQ,
abortion,
supporter of issues like transgender, and soft on other points. And so evangelicals will have a tendency on those points, to become more conservative and champion a political party that would stand against some of these. But I would just like to say that not all evangelicals are Trumpites.
That's why I tell my friends you're a complex individual.
Now, I may vote for Trump, Zvi. I may vote for, I'm registered an independent. So is Katie, my wife, who's standing right there. And so, but for many evangelicals, it makes this election very complex. It makes us torn.
Well, what's tearing at you, for example? As as an example of an evangelical.
I would like to see someone who I felt was more stable emotionally, for one thing. Stable emotionally. Someone who didn't attack everybody who has had a different point of view. But I see the Biden camp, they do that. They've started to do it. In other words, we moved into this. It's the development of a mentality, in my opinion, that is unhealthy, not good for America. So these are the things that concern me. Just have all the evangelicals, the millions and millions of evangelicals thrown into this camp, and it's misrepresentation, in my opinion.
You know, it's funny how one topic leads to another topic in your list.
Yeah.
And
Want to go to the pandemic?
I do, but I want to kind of give a spoiler alert for the topic of principles and values and how to identify them as well as acquire them. And the League of Women Voters, you'll see where I'm going with this in just a minute. The League of Women Voters, by its charter, doesn't care who you vote for. They just want to maximize the vote. They just want everybody to vote.
Good idea.
Right? And my position is analogous to that, which is, I do care what your values are. If you're a Nazi, I'm not going to be happy with it. But I'd rather deal with somebody who is clear, who has identified what their value system is, and they know how they're going to act on the conscious basis of their value system, than someone who's fuzzy-minded and says, well, I'm voting for so-and-so, I don't know why, because, right? Sure. I'd rather, in a crazy, paradoxical kind of a way, Donald Trump has forced all of us from all parts of the political spectrum and from all parts of the religious rainbow. He's really challenged all of us to become conscious of what our value systems are. So I'm really glad that that's on the list for us to talk about.
Yeah,
we can go to the pandemic.
Well, no, let's stay with that. I think. Okay. As a Christian,
right.
What I value is the freedom to express how I believe, and not consider my positions to be unsafe or put me in a place of jeopardy or just kind of a malignant identification. And I have this happen rather frequently. Here in Mill Valley, just last week, somebody came up and said to me, because they knew I was a pastor of a church, and he says, "Are you a Republican?"
Right.
And there's a very liberal county, Marin County. It's about 98% on the Democratic side. Okay, wow. We know this, and so we run up against this.
Yeah.
The kinds of prejudice that people have who will demean you and be antagonistic toward you because you hold to a particular political party. That's what I find dangerous, and the value that I would like most to see is a respect for people who have differing positions, and not to, stigmatize because you're not voting for my candidate. We have to, I think, part of what it means to be a love, in the agape term, the agape love, we don't find out what a person's politics are before we can say, I care about you.
That reminds me of when I met my Palestinian-Israeli friend Manar Azrek, who's been living now in this country for, good Lord, about 10 years now. In fact, she was just over the house for tea with social distancing last night. Manar, very early on in our friendship, and she was one of the earliest members of my interfaith band. She's of a Christian family, originally from Nazareth.
Really?
Yeah, Christian family, Christian Palestinian Arab, yeah. And she said, Tzvi, I want to talk to you about the, Israel, Palestine, the whole political thing. And I said, Manar, I'm not ready. And I'm not ready until we've spent a couple of years sharing food together and sharing music and sharing our common love of God together. And then come back to me in a year or two after we've done that. And we did do that for several years. We ate together, we sang together, we did concerts together, we talked together about many, 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 many things. And then I remember 2 years after we met, I said to Manar, I'm ready to talk about Israel-Palestine. And she laughed and said, I don't need to anymore. Now, that's not everybody, but,
No.
but that's, I evolved and she evolved. But, parallel to that, I mean, you know what we should do? Talk about building bridges is, honestly, what you and I need to do is to bring together evangelical Christians with, I don't know, politically progressive Jews, religious or not, and sit down and to thank God, bless God, and have a meal together.
There you
and
go.
Pray together.
Sure.
And build the bridges of a personal relationship, because it takes a very sturdy teacup, a navy mug, a thick mug that you could throw against the wall and it won't shatter. Not Limoges china that if you blow on it, it breaks. It takes a very sturdy teacup, if you get my metaphor, for two people to really seriously engage in a respectful way on a difficult political, or for that matter, theological discourse. You have to actually first care about each other as human beings. You're not the other, a robot, a zombie that I can dismiss. You're a real life human being. You're my friend Manar. Heck, you're my friend Kent. I can't dismiss you, Kent, because I know you.
And Tzvi, I really appreciate how you termed that, and that avoids and eliminates the development of the cultic mentality.
I hope.
I like to say that I find the politics interesting, maybe even entertaining, but I am going to avoid, as best I can, of getting caught up in taking positions. And when I hear somebody else having a position contrary to mine, that I don't want to demonize that person. I don't want to trash them into the political cesspool. I want to be able to respect that person, have the idea that there's reasons why they have come to this. They may have had different experiences, various things growing up, but I would just like to see Americans learn to appreciate and value different points of view, with the idea of maybe learning something new, seeing something that you didn't go along with. One of the other things I think that happens too is the ghettoizing of the American culture. We live in ghettos in the sense that we're going to employ groupthink. We have our people that we relate to, and just to be at peace, we just adopt the same sort of points of view as we go along, which I think is kind of a social, semi-religious ghettoizing, political ghettoizing of our culture.
There's a biology for it, I believe, which has both pluses and minuses, which is we are a gregarious tribe. The human species is a gregarious tribe, and a lot of our success as a species is because we're not loners, by and large. We do things in groups. The problem with it is the in-group versus the out-group. In other words, the group I'm in doesn't like your group, we go to war. That's the problem of the gregariousness of the human species. Harbor seals don't have these problems, but the California sea lions do. Right?
Now, one of the things that I think of, and we just have a little bit of time
right.
on this program, but I think what develops on both ends of the political spectrum are those who think that if our position doesn't win out, our culture will become absolutely toxic. And it develops that we-they mentality, like I say, the cultic mentality. We mentioned woke, the people who, they're going to change the culture. That would be on the left. Our agenda is the only real agenda. We're going to fight for that agenda, and we're not going to take no for an answer. The left has it, the right's going to have it too. Maybe that we could call that the supremacist. We're going to take our country back. Mm-hmm. You hear some of that rhetoric.
Oh yeah.
You hear that.
Yeah.
And so you've got woke over here and you've got the unidentified opposite. Mm-hmm. There's the dangers. There's the danger. I think the most Americans recognize that this is not the end of the world election. That if the Democrats are elected, if the Republicans are elected, they are so incensed that this is like the end of the world. Everything is going to be trashed. We're going to running scared, and that's the mentality, Stevie, that really bothers me more than anything else. Frankly, I think that Biden is more of a moderate.
Oh, yeah.
Trump is more of an extreme. I'd like to see him maybe come back to a more moderate. I don't know if that's possible.
Oddly enough, I think on economic issues, he's a populist. I may go so far as to say he'd prefer to be a white populist, but that's not the way the system works. And so if he's a populist, he's going to have to be a populist for everybody. And oddly enough, where the resistance is currently is in the Republican majority Senate. Exactly. Right now. That could change after November. So yeah. I see Trump definitely plays the race card. To me, it's pretty obvious. There's no dog whistle. He's explicit. But when it comes to economics, he wants to be good to his wealthy friends, and frankly, he'd be happy to be good to good to everybody in the country, poor or rich. He'd be happy to do it.
Savi, we got more stuff.
Yeah.
One more program. It's going to be our last program.
Oh, wow.
Right here in the balcony studio in Mill Valley. And here we go. All right. Here we go. May the peace of God be with you. Shalom. Amen.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above you.